Things are getting weird, man. We live in a world where if you used a particular password manager, it's possible that your passwords were compromised. We're talking about the Bitwarden CLI compromise today, kind of a weird scenario where because an organization used a security tool, their security was compromised. It's really weird. To be very clear, this is actually a compromise of the Bitwarden CLI, by the way, the tool that you use to get into Bitwarden. This has nothing to do with the actual Bitwarden vault. But either way, very weird story about a weird scenario with supply chain that hasn't really stopped. It's kind of interesting. So to set the stage here, a long time ago, and we're talking about eons, millennia in terms of supply chain attacks, March of last year, the site or the provider Checkmarx was compromised. One of their GitHub actions had been attacked by Team PCP. If you're not aware of what Checkmarx is a tool for doing AppSec, right? Application security. They are a provider that gives you the power to do static analysis, security testing, and security composition analysis. Not an ad, just literally what the tool does. And so like any good tool, if you want to integrate it into your GitHub flow, your process of releasing tooling through GitHub CI/CD, through GitLab, whatever, they release a GitHub action where you can use their tool in your GitHub workflows. This is like a very good way to make your tools secure by just having automatic tools kind of check them for composition issues. Unless, of course, the action has been compromised by a hacker. So on March 23rd, 2026, Checkmarx saw that a hacker injected malicious payloads into these GitHub actions, which allowed the attackers, when other teams use those actions, to pull the data out of the workflow. The data included a variety of tokens, including GitHub tokens, that allowed Bitwarden CLI to be compromised. So Bitwarden CLI was affected, the version being Bitwarden CLI 2026 4.0, where malicious code was published in bw1.js, a file included in the package contents, because of the fact that Bitwarden CI/CD pipeline was hacked by Checkmarx CI/CD pipeline. Just insane scenario. So what the malware ended up doing, just like any good npm malware would do, it installs a malicious package post-install script called bw-setup.js. That tool would run, it would actually reach out and install bun, pull down bun, and then inside of bun run another follow-on script and run bw1.js, do a quick triage of what OS you were on, and then bada bing, bada boom, they're pulling up all of your API keys for AWS, NPM tokens, GCP, and Kubernetes, as well as your GitHub auth tokens and your NPM auth tokens. This is the trend, the guys, that we're seeing, which is getting really terrifying, where these package managers are getting compromised and they're using it as a worm to hop from one maintainer to the next, to the next, to the next. They're calling this Shai Halud because in the metadata of the requests that we're seeing here, where the attackers are uploading these keys and stuff to GitHub, in the metadata of the description of the commit they make, they say Shai Halud, the third coming. Unrelated, by the way, GitHub is having a very bad week. I literally saw before I recorded this video, pull requests are just randomly disappearing. Like pull requests that are open are just not showing to users. And then when I was in Miami with the terminal team on Friday and Thursday, they were having an issue where merge requests that were made into repos were being undone just magically, and like engineers were getting yelled at that their code wasn't being finished, even though they had finished it, but they had no proof because the merge request disappeared. GitHub. Normally, I don't like to shit on companies. These videos are very kind of like fun, just like higher level news videos. But in this case, GitHub, like you got it. This is a PR blunder. Get your shit together. Okay, back to the video. Now, socket.dev did an interesting technical analysis on the actual code that was being extracted, like the data that was being extracted from this malware. And this is the first variant that we're seeing actually where the Shai Halud worm is picking up not only all of these configs and these auth tokens, but also Claude and other MCP configuration files. I forget where I read it, but I think that this actor is a very heavily anti-AI motivated actor. So they're pulling up the MCP data likely because the MCP data has authentication information. It has like passwords and tokens that you have to use to actually log in to the MCP. I think also it's kind of like a fuck you because they don't like AI to begin with. They're not really a huge fan of like the trend towards everything being AI everything, which I agree with, but also I'm not writing worms on the internet. So, take that how you will. This compromise kind of highlights a really scary pattern that we're seeing that I'm not really sure what to do about. I have an opinion I'll go into here in a second, but the issue that I see is kind of twofold. The first part is that people are being de-incentivized to make good security decisions, right? The security decisions being like update your software or like use security tools in CI/CD, right? Well, a lot of the times what we're seeing is the most recent version of an update have been compromised. So teams are actually being kind of incentivized to, all right, right, if the update comes out, maybe we wait a week, or maybe we only ever stay like one update behind that update so that like we don't get pwned by the latest supply chain issue. And then also the majority of these compromises come from the security tooling themselves being compromised. Again, Checkmarx is a really normal, good tool to use for application security. In your CI/CD, you integrate some kind of AST or static analysis security tooling, software composition analysis, and you use that to make your software more secure. But through this pattern of using security tools, we're actually having tooling be secure. That's problem number one. Problem number two is this is a worm. What is a worm? A worm is by definition a piece of malware that, because of the access that it has, is able to replicate to other places semi-autonomously, right? The NPM scenario is pretty scary because by compromising the maintainer of a certain package, they can use the token that is used to publish that package to jump around to other computers, right? They can use that access to basically compromise the maintainers of other packages, and that is a very hard problem to stomp out. The reason being, with a worm, you never really know where it is because it could pretty much be anywhere. The quantum superposition problem with electrons, but for, NPM packages are kind of crazy. Now, I have some hot takes on how we could possibly solve this. One of them, in my opinion, is literally just have GitHub like nuke all authentication, just have all auth tokens and NPM tokens. Every token, destroy all tokens, hashtag, started on Twitter. Remove all the tokens so that we can re-roll out tokens that are known good, and maybe that's a good way to start. The problem is when you do that, you don't actively know right now what other CI/CD scenarios may be compromised, so that wouldn't exactly fix it. Also, technically, that would cause like the ability for developers to contribute to the internet to go down for a couple days or weeks. But to be fair, GitHub is contributing to developers not being able to push code to GitHub, so like maybe it's not that big a deal. Sorry, GitHub, you're catching strays today. It's how it's going to go. Sorry, you kind of deserve it this week. Now, I want to highlight what's really a good thing about this, actually, on kind of a more positive note, is the industry, the community is getting so used to these supply chain hacks that the Bitwarden CLI was compromised for roughly 90 minutes. Not 90 days, not 90 months, 90 weeks, 90 minutes. They got in, they pushed the bad update for about 90 minutes, and then someone pulled it, okay? I think in total I read somewhere that only 334 people were hacked by this. 0 is the right number, right? But 334 is very small compared to, what could have gone down for this. So that's actually a good trend. Now, if you think you may be one of the people that is affected by this, Endor Labs did a good write-up on the IOCs for this. So this is a package that was compromised during that time. It's deprecated now with do not use, and these are the hashes of the BW1 BW script itself and the tarball, as well as network behavior that you can check for to see if any of your logs contain it. I want to be very clear, guys. Bitwarden is a good tool. Password managers are a good tool. There are a variety of trade-offs in the different kinds of password managers you can use, right? You have the ones that are hosted for you, like Bitwarden, that you're putting some trust in the external party that they're doing the right thing with your passwords. You have ones that are self-hosted you could run locally, but the issue there is you have to be able to access the self-hosted location. And then you have the hardware security module versions like your YubiKeys or the HSM on your iPhone, right? Where it's stored locally, but you have to trust what the hardware is doing. At the end of the day, we're just transitioning trust to an external entity, and it's up to you to decide which one is the right one. What you shouldn't do is use one password for everything, certain people on the internet, because that, ultimately leads to your blast radius of a compromise being about as big as the Indian Ocean. I don't know if it's a big ocean, I just kind of made that up. Anyway, but yeah, guys, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Stay salty out there. I know things are going to get weird for a little bit. Computers are going to keep getting hacked, right? That's kind of how it's going to go. If you're a maintainer of an NPM package, just keep your wits about you, right? If you're a maintainer of a CI/CD pipeline, make sure you're monitoring those. Do everything you can to kind of stay ahead of this. We're seeing these patterns evolve, so we know generally what's going to occur. GitHub's going to go down, but when it comes back up, there might be a compromised CI/CD pipeline, so we got to be aware of those. Thank you for watching, guys. I really do appreciate it. I enjoy making these YouTube videos. Big changes coming from me on Friday of this week. We'll talk about that when we get there. But in the meantime, go watch this other video about Team PCP doing something else kind of weird that I think you will also enjoy. We'll see you there. If you're still here. You want to hang out? All right, cool. Fucking go watch the video. Goodbye.